Donald Trump just made a major announcement that he wouldn't actually mind using military force in order to take over Greenland. And making Greenland part of the United States is going to be a major blow to the European Union. And this could be so bad that it could lead to the catastrophic collapse of the union that we know it today, and will change the entire global geopolitics. And if you also include the fact that Donald Trump wants to make Canada the 51st state of the United States, I mean, the world is going to change and we will see things that we have never seen in our entire lives. That is going to be something. So here in this video, I want to talk to you not just about that, but also about how making Greenland part of the United States is going to have catastrophic consequences. I mean, it's going to be great for the United States. It is going to boost the US economy because most of the natural resources that are located in Greenland haven't been exploited yet. So maybe this is the time for ExxonMobil and US companies to get into Greenland and make Greenland great again. Yes, from one aspect, it is really great because the Greenlandish economy is going to go to the moon. On the other side, it is very bad if you're actually caring about the environment and you want to preserve the nature in your country. But nonetheless, the population of Greenland is so tiny that nobody even counts it, nobody cares about it. It's like, what, 45,000 people? That is absolutely nothing. It's not even like 1 million people to consider. That's like a small town somewhere in the corner of wherever. So let's take a deep look at how important Greenland is to the European Union. Now, if you take a look at the European Union, it's one of the wealthiest places on planet Earth after the United States. And just by looking at this map, you can already see at the size of Greenland, it's so huge that it shouldn't be undermined. The entire size of the EU is 1.7 square miles. On the other hand, Greenland is 836,000 square miles. What does it tell you? By losing Greenland, European Union is losing a third of its territories. Yes, technically, Greenland is not part of the European Union, but Greenland belongs to Denmark, and Denmark is part of the European Union. So by losing Greenland, technically the EU is losing one of its major important lands that it has. Another thing that you have to care about is that Greenland is filled with natural resources, one of the places that haven't been exploited all these years, and it's filled with rare earth minerals and oil and gas. I mean, I can give you a very long list of the things of the natural resources that Greenland is filled with, and it's extremely strategically important for the United States. Because if you take a look at what's happening over the last, 30 years, China has been dominating and created an entire monopoly on the rare earth minerals and the rare earth metals in order to create batteries and dominate technologies. Yes, you can create a semiconductor, an advanced semiconductor, you can create an advanced technology, but in order to build that technology, you need the metals in the first place. So whoever has control over those rare earth metals is going to control the future, is going to control the 21st century. I mean, if you're wondering why China is pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into Africa, that's exactly your answer. And Greenland is located just right beside the United States. I mean, first of all, the United States needs it as a national security thing. And secondly, exploiting the resources will give the United States that edge that it needs in order to combat China and fight China in that case. Another important thing that you have to consider is that the North Pole is one of the places that also hasn't actually been exploited yet. And if you actually think about it, around 30% of the world's natural gas and discovered natural gas is located in the North Pole. 13% of undiscovered oil is also located in the North Pole. And I haven't even talked about the fresh water. And guess who dominates the North Pole? Exactly, Russia. Because United States doesn't have a lot of access to it. Of course, the US has Alaska, and everything across Alaska might actually belong to the United States. But if you actually take a look historically and over the last 20 or 30 years, Russia spent like billions of dollars. It created those ships that would allow Russia to build military bases all across the Arctic, because It's filled with so many resources, and whoever will control it militarily will have that edge. And Greenland, since part of Denmark and Denmark is part of the European Union, had also an upper hand in order to have some say around what is going to happen in the Arctic. I mean, just take a look at the map and you can clearly see that Greenland is located right where it's supposed to be located. And you also have Canada that also have massive influence. So by integrating these two countries into the United States, suddenly the US will have such a huge edge over Russia in controlling the Arctic that nobody could have imagined. Because, I mean, Canada, I mean, let's be honest, Canada, yes, it's the second largest country after Russia. It's even larger than the United States, but there is no one. I mean, people don't, I mean, the population of Canada is like what, 37 or 40 million people at best? That is nothing. That's 10 times the United States. And yet it is the second world's largest country. When Trump said that it's about national security of the United States, he wasn't actually wrong. He's like, you know what, we're competing with China. We're not competing with the European Union. What does the EU produces? Yes, there are some industries where the EU is great, but even those industries, the EU have been struggling to keep and maintain its competitive edge. And now China is out competing the entire European Union. So United States looks at the future with the national security thing is that we have to beat China. And part of that, we don't want China to come to Greenland and invest billions of dollars because China can come and just offer Greenland a much better deal than the United States. And if China will be at the offshore of the United States, that is obviously national security threat. And secondly, if China dominates the natural resources that are located in Greenland, that is another huge problem with the United States. But this is just one out of many problems. Another thing you have to consider is the shipping route. Now, if you take a look at how the global trade works, everything is shipped through containers on huge ships. So 90% of all the trade are done through the oceans. Whoever controls the oceans controls the global trade. That's why the United States has the largest aircraft carriers in the world. The United States has the largest fleet of ships all across the globe. And this map perfectly illustrates the importance of global trade. Without having a dominance on global trade, United States wouldn't be as rich as today. On one side, it trades with the rest of the European Union. On the other side, it trades with China and Japan and entire Southeast Asia. And one of the most fundamental problems that the United States had all across these years is that it needed to connect the eastern coast with the western coast. And you might say that, well, that's not a problem. We actually have railway. We have trains all across the country. Well, it might actually make sense from one side, but how do you imagine the United States actually driving or moving its aircraft carriers from one side to another? How it's possible for the United States to do that quickly and effectively? And that's why back in the days, the US built the Panama Canal. Of course, it does not belong to the United States anymore because it was kind of weird when you have a canal in another country and it belongs to the United States. And that's why back in the year 2000, the ownership of the canal went back to the Panamese people. Those ships that go from Southeast Asia into European Union, they pay a lot of money in order to make sure that they don't take the entire route through the entire Africa, but actually cross it through here. And now because the ice is melting in the North Pole, what do you think is happening over there? A new route is being built. And because European Union, by having Denmark at its part and Greenland being part of Denmark, they had some control over the North Pole and they could actually negotiate with Russia and create an alternative road in the future to make sure that European Union will have a much faster route through the entire Southeast Asia. And now Greenland being part of the United States, they are going to lose that, which means that they will depend on Russia and the United States in order to make sure they can trade with the rest of the world. That is not really a position you want to be. That is a very vulnerable position. Of course, it's not going to have like an immediate impact today because the route through the Arctic is not yet richly completed. I mean, there are a few months in a year where you can actually move the ships over there, and most of the ships would actually decide to take the traditional road in order to make sure that they don't get stuck somewhere in the Arctic. But over the next 10, 20 or maybe 30 years, it is going to be one of the most important routes for the ships. And EU is not going to have any impact over it, and EU will have to pay high fees to Greenland that will belong to the United States or Russia in order to make sure that they get their things faster. And even if you take a look at the numbers, you will be amazed. Like right now, if they actually ship it through the Suez Canal, it's around 13,000 miles. But if they do it through the Arctic, it's 8,000 miles, which means that the road is 40% shorter if you actually take this road. But without Greenland, that is not possible. Now, of course, the EU can do that by paying high fees to the US or Russia, but that's another thing that EU wouldn't mind. Because if you take a look at the European economy right now, they're struggling. Their industries are closing down because China is out competing them. They don't have an advanced tech sector like the United States or China. What exactly do they have left? They don't even have an energy. Of course, they have some gas. For example, if you take a look at countries such as Norway and Denmark, and even the UK to a certain extent has some oil and gas. But other than that, that's not enough to entirely supply the entire European Union. And that's why for the past 50 years, they've been relying on Russia. And now the relationship between Russia and European Union is ruined so much that I don't think they will start keep buying Russian gas anymore anytime soon. They might probably in the next couple of years, but that reliable relationship does no longer exist. And that's why it's another blow to the European Union. By taking out Greenland to the United States and making it part of the US and even Canada, the United States will no longer have to protect the European Union because the European Union will actually be at the mercy of the United States. And if Trump will do what he said that he will do, which is taking the United States out of NATO, that will literally be the end of the European Union. And it's going to take the European Union probably 10, 20, or maybe 30 years in order to build a reliable and effective entire military industrial complex. And if you just take a look at the numbers, you will find out what I'm talking about. Look at the top exporters of military equipments, and at the top of it you see the United States that is responsible for around 41%. Now back when we had like Soviet Union versus the United States, that number was much more even, but today there is no competition. Yes, there is some competition from France because France is still an empire and it runs and controls a lot of African countries, and there is some competition from a country like Russia. Now this number was probably around 17 to 20% like 5-10 years ago, but you have to understand that the military industrial complex does not work like a traditional business. Let me give you an example just for you to illustrate the point and for you to understand why exactly it's so difficult for any country, including European countries, to build a reliable military industrial complex. You see, if you take a look at any business, let's take a look at Apple. So Apple gonna spend billions of dollars and they will develop a product such as an iPhone. And then they will take this iPhone and they will sell it to you, to people like me, to people like you, to everyone else. And in return, they will get this money and they will be able to spend on R&D, for example, build new factories, and their stock, for example, is going to grow. And people like me can invest in this company and make millions of dollars, or people like you as well. You're gonna spend and you're gonna invest in this business and you're gonna make millions of dollars. And over time, Apple is going to become the most valuable company in the world, which it actually did. And that's just one example out of how the stock market works, how companies make money, how businesses grow and dominate the world or dominate any particular industry. But that's not the case with the military industrial complex. Let me give you an example. So let's say you have Lockheed Martin, and Lockheed Martin produces some of the most advanced weapons in the world, such as missiles. And these missiles cost millions of dollars, probably dozens of millions of dollars. Now, in order to use these missiles, you need a war. So you have, for example, the US aircraft carriers, or you have US systems using those missiles. And that's why the US military is always at war. Because if you're not always at war, then probably gonna get, how many missiles do you need? You probably need like what, 1,000 missiles, 10,000, a million? I mean, there is a limit to how many missiles you actually need. So if you actually need that limit, then you're no longer going to buy those missiles. But if you don't buy those missiles, then Lockheed Martin is not going to have the money in order to invest in R&D, in order to make sure that they are developing the most advanced weapons in the world. And that's why the system here doesn't work the way that it works like here, right? So the system is fundamentally and completely different. That's why the US military needs to always be at a war in order to keep using those missiles, in order for the government to keep providing military contracts to the US military companies in order to make sure that they keep building the most advanced military weapons in the world. That's why the United States built some of the best weapons in the world. But for that to happen, you need to have an effective military that is constantly at war, and you need companies and you need taxpayers who will actually fund this. So you have this cycle that keeps going on. And that's why if you take a look at the US military, you will find out that since 1940s, like since World War II, the United States did not stop fighting all across the globe. Like there wasn't a period, even a single year in the entire history of the United States since 1945 in order for it to stop fighting. That is not possible. Because if you do that, then suddenly this entire equation no longer is going to work, because it doesn't work like a traditional business. So if you take a look at the European Union, they do not have that military industrial complex. Yes, there are some countries within the European Union that produce some of the most advanced weapons that you can possibly buy. Some of the fighter jets, some of the missiles, but that's absolutely nothing. First of all, you need to keep building them. Secondly, you need to build them at a massive scale. And thirdly, in order to build them at a massive scale, for you to reduce the price. But in order to do that, you need to have an effective military that is constantly using those weapons. But that's not what European Union actually has. And if you're wondering why they don't have that, because over the last 80 years, they've been relying on the United States for their defense. So instead for the European militaries to keep fighting and getting an experience, they just relied on the United States, and they kept buying US fighter jets. They kept buying US frigates. They kept buying US missiles. So the US military industrial complex kept actually advancing farther and farther, while European Union mostly relied on the United States. So in order for the European Union to fix this problem, first of all, they need a proper military. Without a proper military, you cannot do that. And then you need to build military industrial complex. So without that, you can't. And then you need to build an entire system, just like the United States has over here, in order for your military to keep fighting all across the globe in order to fund that. And that might take anything between $500 billion up to $1 trillion over the next 5 to 10 years to make that possible. And it doesn't even guarantee that will happen, because right now European Union is actually facing a lot of challenges that does not allow it to spend that kind of money. And the only way for the European Union to do that is to do that as a bloc, because there isn't a single country within the entire union that can do that individually. France cannot do that individually, even though that France has been actually spending a substantial amount of money on military, because France actually controls a lot of colonies in Africa, even though that we are in 2025. And secondly, we have Germany, which is the largest economy within the union, and even it cannot afford that. So if Germany and France will come up with a plan to do that, it doesn't mean that the rest of the European Union will agree with that. So they could actually go directly into a different alliance with the United States to protect them. So that could actually create a lot of problems within the entire union and could lead to the crash on the breakdown of the entire European Union. These are some of the largest, biggest geopolitical changes that will take place in the next couple of years, at least when Trump is going to be president. And when he's out of office, he's going to set the trend. So the next person who will be the president of the United States most likely will keep Trump rules and the trends that he set for. Just like take Biden, for example. When he got into the office, he kept the exact same tariffs on China. In fact, he even increased some of those tariffs in China. So we're going to have two types of people. On one side, we'll have people who will just watch how everything is changing, and that's going to be their life. On the other side, we'll have people who will take advantage out of it. Like the top 1% isn't going to just watch these geopolitical changes. It doesn't matter for them who is winning and who is losing. They're going to win regardless, because they will invest in the right assets. They will invest in the right stocks. And by investing in the right stocks, you are going to benefit out of this crisis. So if you want to just watch, you can keep watching. On the other hand, if you want to profit from this crisis, like always rich people do, then you can actually find out how to invest, learn, educate yourself, and pick up the right stocks. And if you need help with that, make sure to check the first link in the description. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.